The flowers hit the wet grass before Daniel Cole even realized his hands had opened. White lilies, soaked now, ruined. His knees buckled and he grabbed the edge of the marble headstone to keep from falling. The rain was coming down in sheets, drumming against his black umbrella, but he didn't feel it. He didn't feel anything. He never did. Not anymore. Not at this grave. 5 years. 5 years he had been coming to this exact spot, in this exact cemetery on this exact day. 5 years of kneeling in the mud. 5 years of talking to stone. 5 years of pretending there was still something left of the man he used to be before the night the ocean took his wife away. But then the voice came. Small, quiet, certain. Sir, your wife is still alive. Daniel's whole body locked. Every muscle, every nerve. The rain kept falling. The wind kept blowing. But the world had stopped. He turned slowly. A boy stood behind him, maybe 8 years old, soaking wet, wearing a jacket 2 sizes too big for his small frame. His eyes were wide, dark, and completely unafraid. In his small hands, he held a photograph face down against his chest, clutching it like something precious. Daniel stared at him for a long time. Then he whispered, "What did you just say?" The boy didn't blink. "Your wife," he said again, nodding toward the grave. "She's not in there. She's alive." The umbrella slipped from Daniel's hand. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Daniel Cole had not always been a man who lived in graveyards. Once he had been the kind of man who filled rooms. Tall, confident, quick to laugh. The sort of man who walked into a meeting and made everyone else feel like they were late to something important. He had built his company, Cole Meridian Holdings, from nothing. From a rented office the size of a closet and a business plan held together with paper clips and sheer stubbornness. And he had done it not for the money, though the money had come, but because he loved to build things. He loved to solve problems that seemed unsolvable. But none of that had ever been the best part of his life. The best part was Amelia. He had met her at a small charity dinner in the city. She had been volunteering, not attending as a guest. She was carrying a tray of drinks and she nearly spilled one on his jacket, and instead of apologizing the way most people would, she had looked at the jacket, then at him and said, "That would honestly be an improvement." He had laughed so hard he almost choked. And from that night forward he had never quite been the same. She was not like the women who circled men like Daniel. She did not want the penthouse or the car or the invitations to private events. She wanted Sunday mornings. She wanted to talk until 3 in the morning about everything and nothing. She wanted to know what he was afraid of and what he had given up and what he still believed in. She loved him before the name Daniel Cole meant anything to anyone. They were married 3 years after they met. Small wedding. Only people they actually loved. No cameras. Their life together was not perfect. No life is. But it was real. It was warm. It was the kind of life that made Daniel feel, for the first time, like he was building something that actually mattered. And standing in all of that warmth, casting a shadow only Daniel could not see, was Victor Hale. Victor was Daniel's business partner, his oldest professional ally, the man who had co-signed the first office lease, who had sat across from investors with Daniel when no one believed in them, who had clinked glasses with him on the night Cole Meridian finally broke into the top tier. Victor was brilliant, measured, and in every public regard, completely loyal. But Victor watched Amelia in the way that men watch things they have decided belong to them. Daniel never saw it. How could he? He trusted Victor the way he trusted daylight. And Victor was careful. Victor was always careful. Then came the night that ended everything. It was November. A storm had been building along the coast all day. Amelia had gone to visit a friend and was driving home late, alone, on the coastal road above the bay. The road was slick. The visibility was nearly zero. At some point, on a stretch of road with no guardrail, Her car went through the barrier and down into the water below. The car was found the next morning, partially submerged, both airbags deployed, her door open. Her body was never recovered. The official conclusion was accidental drowning. The ocean, the investigators said, sometimes kept what it took. The funeral was held 10 days later. A closed casket because there was nothing to put inside it. 300 people came. Victor gave a eulogy that made grown men cry. Daniel did not cry at the funeral. He could not. He sat in the front row and stared at the casket and felt as though someone had reached inside his chest and removed the part of him that had ever felt anything at all. For 5 years he kept living. He kept working. Cole Meridian kept growing. From the outside, Daniel Cole looked like a man who had survived his grief and come out stronger. From the inside he was an empty building. Lights on. Nobody home. He visited the grave every year on the anniversary of the accident. It was the only ritual he allowed himself. The only moment when the wall came down and he let himself remember that he had once loved someone completely and that she was gone. Until the boy appeared. Daniel knelt down in the wet grass, bringing himself to eye level with the child. His voice was gentle but frayed at the edges. "What's your name?" The boy held his gaze. "Noah." "Where are your parents, Noah? Where do you live?" "Far from here," Noah said. "We drove a long way." "Who drove you?" "My uncle. He's waiting at the gate. But he doesn't know I came to find you." He looked at the grave and then back at Daniel. "I saw your picture in a newspaper. At the house. My mother keeps it." Daniel's pulse spiked. "Your mother?" Noah reached into his jacket and pulled out the photograph he had been holding. He held it out carefully, the way a child offers something they know is important without fully understanding why. Daniel took it. He looked at it. The world fell away. The woman in the photograph was standing outside a small blue cottage. She was wearing a yellow dress. Her hair was longer than Daniel remembered. There were lines on her face that had not been there before. But her eyes, her jaw, the way she held her shoulders, slightly tilted to the right, which was a habit she had had since she was a teenager and had broken her collarbone falling off a bicycle. It was Amelia. Daniel's hand was shaking so badly the photograph rattled. "This is your mother?" he managed. "We call her Anna," Noah said. "But I found your picture in a box she keeps hidden. Your name is on the back of one of them. Daniel." He said the name carefully, the way children say names they have practiced. "She tells me she doesn't remember where she came from, but she keeps your picture. So I thought maybe you would know." Daniel looked at the photograph again. His throat had closed completely. "How old are you, Noah?" "8, he said. "Almost 9. Daniel did the math without meaning to. He stopped. He breathed. He looked at the boy's face again. His eyes, dark brown, almost black. The way his mouth curved when he spoke. The line of his nose. He stood up slowly. He needed to think. He needed air, which was absurd because he was outside in the rain, but his lungs had stopped cooperating. "Can I keep this?" he asked, his voice barely a sound. Noah nodded. "I think that's why I came," the boy said. Daniel drove home that night in silence. He sat at his kitchen table until 2 in the morning with the photograph in front of him. He picked it up and put it down a dozen times. He told himself it was impossible. He told himself that grief was a powerful enough force to make a desperate man see what he needed to see. He told himself that the photograph was probably a forgery, that someone was playing a cruel and elaborate trick. But he could not make himself believe it. The next morning he called the best private investigator he had ever hired and told him to find a small coastal town with a woman named Anna who had a son named Noah and no verifiable past. "That's not a lot to go on," the investigator said. The boy said they drove a long way. Coastal. Find every small town within 300 miles. Cross-reference any woman who appeared in local records in the last 5 years without a prior history. That could take weeks. Start today. What happened next was not what Daniel expected. Within 48 hours, the investigator called back. Not with results. With a problem. "I've run into something strange," he said. "I found two possible matches. Small coastal towns. Women without prior records. But here's the thing, Daniel. Both times I requested further records, the requests were flagged. One of them was actually intercepted before it reached the county clerk. Someone with access has placed a block on specific search patterns." Daniel sat very still. What kind of access does someone need to do that? "The kind that costs a lot of money," the investigator said quietly. "Or the kind that comes with the right connections." Daniel thought of Victor. Victor, who had always handled the legal architecture of Cole Meridian. Victor, who sat on 3 government advisory boards and had lunch with judges. Victor, who had stood at Amelia's funeral with tears streaming down his face while he gave that eulogy that made grown men weep. Daniel hung up the phone and stared at nothing for a long time. He did not confront Victor. Not yet. That was not the kind of man Daniel was. He gathered first. He thought first. He moved quietly and he moved carefully. He hired a second investigator. An independent one with no connection to Cole Meridian. He told her nothing about the first search. He gave her only the photograph of Anna and asked her to identify the location from the background details. The cottage, the trees, the particular shape of the fence. She came back in 4 days. "A small fishing town called Grayport," she said. "About 280 miles north along the coast. The cottage matches a property rented long-term by a woman using the name Anna Sorrell. She's lived there for just over 5 years. No employment records before that. She does craft work. Sells things at the local market. Keeps entirely to herself." Daniel did not sleep that night. He left before dawn the next morning. Alone. He told no one where he was going. He took a car that was not registered to him. And he drove north along the coast road with the photograph on the passenger seat and his heart beating so hard he could feel it in his teeth. He was 2 hours into the drive when his phone rang. A known number. He answered. A voice, flat and distorted, said, "Stop driving, Daniel. You won't find what you're looking for. And you'll only make things worse for everyone." He ended the call. He kept driving. The closer he got to Grayport, the tighter the knot in his stomach became. He passed through 2 small towns that looked like the edges of the world. Fishing boats. Quiet streets. People who did not look at strangers too long because looking too long at strangers in a town like this was its own kind of conversation. He was 15 minutes outside Grayport when a car pulled out of a side road behind him and stayed close on his tail for the next 6 miles. He slowed down. He sped up. It matched him. Then, just before the town limits, it turned off and disappeared. Daniel pulled into Grayport just past noon. He found Noah waiting for him. The boy was sitting on a stone wall at the edge of the main road, eating an apple, as though he had known exactly when Daniel would arrive. He hopped down and walked to the car window without a word. "You came," Noah said. "I came." "Follow me," the boy said. "But not too fast. She can't know yet. She gets scared when things happen too fast. If you're still watching up to now, type 'I'm still here' in the comment section." Noah led him through the back roads of the town, past the harbor, past the old fish market, up a hill lined with wind-bent trees, and then down a narrow lane that ended at a blue cottage pressed against the edge of the cliff with the ocean visible behind it. Daniel stopped the car 50 meters away. He got out slowly. His legs felt wrong. His hands were cold. He walked to the garden wall and looked over. She was there. She was kneeling in the garden, pulling weeds from around a row of herbs. She was wearing a pale green shirt and her hair was down around her shoulders. She was humming something. He could not hear what. But even from that distance, even after 5 years, even with every rational part of his mind telling him to be careful, to be sure, to not destroy himself again if he was wrong, he knew. He knew the shape of her. He knew the way her shoulders moved. He knew her. "Amelia," he said, came out as barely a sound. But she went still. She did not turn around. She just stopped moving. Her hands hovered above the soil. The humming stopped. Then she slowly turned her head. And Daniel saw her face. Up close it was worse than the photograph. Because the photograph had not shown him the fear that lived behind her eyes. It had not shown him the way she looked at him, the way a person looks at something they almost recognize but cannot name. Something familiar and threatening all at once. She got to her feet quickly and stepped back. "Can I help you?" she said. Her voice was different, quieter, more careful. But underneath the caution it was the same voice. Daniel could not speak. "I said, can I help you?" she repeated. "This is private property." He took a step forward and she took a step back, and something in him broke completely. "Amelia," he said again, louder. "My name is Daniel Cole. We were married, you and I, for 6 years. We were married and you disappeared and I buried an empty casket, and I have been coming to your grave for 5 years, and I need you to look at me." She stared at him. Her face was white. "I don't know who you are," she said. Her voice was shaking. "My name is Anna. I don't know anyone named Daniel. I don't have a husband." "You don't remember," he said. "I know. But I'm here and I'm telling you the truth." "Please leave," she said. "Please. I'm gonna call someone. Amelia, please." "My name is Anna." The shout came out of her like it had been waiting a long time. Her eyes were full of tears she was refusing to let fall. "I don't know you. I don't know who you think I am, but I am asking you to leave my property right now." Daniel stopped. He reached into his jacket and took out the photograph. He held it out toward her. "Then can you tell me," he said quietly, "why you kept this?" She looked at the photograph. She went completely still. It was a photograph of Daniel, standing outside their home, laughing at something off camera. It was the back of the same photograph the boy had shown him, which was how he had known to find her here. The color drained from her face. She did not speak. "You kept my picture," he said. "You didn't know why, but you kept it." Noah had appeared at the garden gate. He looked between them. He said nothing. Anna looked at her son, then at the photograph, then at Daniel, and something in her face cracked open just a little. Not recognition exactly. More like the feeling a person gets when a word is on the tip of their tongue and the world is holding its breath waiting for them to find it. "I don't understand," she whispered. "I know," Daniel said. "I'm going to explain everything. But first I need you to know that I'm not here to frighten you. I'm not here to force anything. I drove 280 miles because a little boy found me at a grave and told me the truth." He looked at Noah. Noah gave a small nod. Daniel turned back to her. "I just need you to let me explain." After a long silence, she said, "Come inside." The investigation that followed moved fast once Daniel had what he needed. Because what happened next was not just the discovery of Amelia. It was the unraveling of Victor Hale. The private investigator, working quietly, found the original work order for the brake modification on Amelia's car. It had been placed through a shell company. The shell company traced back through 3 layers to a holding account that Victor had established 6 years earlier, and which he had apparently forgotten to fully dissolve. A forensic accountant Daniel hired found the payments to 2 officials in the coastal investigation team, who had ensured the search for Amelia's body was called off quickly. He found the payoff to the fisherman who had originally pulled her from the water and been paid to relocate and never speak of what he found. He found the falsified medical records submitted under a different name to the regional hospital where Amelia had been treated for head trauma and memory loss, and then quietly discharged with no next of kin listed and no prior history in the system. Victor had not wanted to kill her. That was the detail that turned Daniel's stomach the most. Victor had arranged the accident as a removal, a disappearance. Something that would take Amelia out of Daniel's life and leave just enough ambiguity that Daniel would spend the rest of his life mourning and never moving forward. Victor had wanted Daniel broken, loyal only to his grief. And with Amelia gone and Daniel hollowed out, Victor had very quietly, over 5 years, been positioning himself to absorb the majority control of Cole Meridian. It was not a crime of passion. It was a long, cold, calculated act of greed dressed up as loyalty. When the police came for Victor, it was a Thursday morning. He was in his office on the 32nd floor of the Cole Meridian building. Daniel had not warned him. He had wanted it to be a Thursday morning in his office. He had wanted Victor to be somewhere comfortable and certain and untouchable when the door opened. He had wanted Victor to have exactly 1 second of understanding before everything collapsed. The arrest made national news by afternoon. Victor's lawyers fought hard. They always do. But the evidence was too layered, too carefully assembled, too precisely documented. By the time the case reached trial, there was nothing left to fight with. Victor Hale was convicted on charges of criminal conspiracy, fraud, and willful endangerment. He would not be a free man for a very long time. But the harder thing was Amelia. Memory is not a locked door that opens when you find the right key. It is more like a river that was rerouted years ago, and you cannot simply redirect it back because you have figured out where the original channel ran. Amelia's doctors were careful. They were honest. They told Daniel that some things might return. Others might not. They told him that pressure would only push her further away. That the worst thing he could do was want her to remember so badly that it became its own kind of weight she was carrying. So he did not push. He came to Grayport on weekends. He sat with her in the garden. He told her stories. Not stories about their life together, not at first, just stories. Things that had happened. Places he had been. Small funny things. The kind of low-stakes conversation that does not ask anything in return. And she would listen. Sometimes she would laugh. Sometimes she would say something that sounded like something she had always said, and neither of them would mention it. Noah moved between them like a bridge. He was natural at it. He had his mother's instincts, and Daniel was now certain, Daniel's stubbornness. The boy had no memory of a father and no template for what that was supposed to look like, so he simply decided what it would look like and proceeded accordingly. He started calling Daniel by his first name, then by something easier, then by a word Daniel had not heard directed at himself before and which made him have to look away for a moment when he first heard it. 3 months after Daniel found the cottage, Amelia found the box. It had been in the top of the wardrobe the entire time she had lived in the cottage. She had never known what to do with it. Inside were letters, 17 letters, written in her own handwriting, addressed to a name she had not known at the time of writing, addressed to Daniel. She had written them during the years she was Anna. She had not known why she was writing them. She had not known who they were for. She had sat at the kitchen table late at night, after Noah was asleep, and she had written things she had no context for. Feelings. Fragments. The ghost of a life pressing against the inside of her mind like a hand pressing against glass. She brought the box to Daniel on a Sunday afternoon. He was sitting on the garden wall. Noah was somewhere inside. She sat next to him and set the box between them and said, "I think these are yours." He looked at the letters. He did not touch them. "Will you read them?" he asked. She picked up the first one. She read it aloud. Her voice was steady for the first letter. By the second, it had started to change. Not breaking, just changing the way a voice changes when a person is trying to hold a door shut against something very large pressing from the other side. By the 5th letter, her hands were shaking. By the 10th, she had stopped reading aloud and was reading silently, and tears were running down her face without her seeming to notice them. Then she stopped. She sat very still for a long moment. Then she said, "The kitchen in the house we used to live in. The light came in from the left in the morning. There was a crack in one of the window panes that made a sound when the wind came from the north." Daniel could not breathe. "There was a song," she said. "You used to play it when you were cooking, and you always got the words wrong on purpose to make me laugh." His whole body was shaking. She turned and looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time her eyes held something they had not held before. Not fear, not caution, not the careful distance of a woman who had learned to survive by trusting no one. She said his name. Daniel. Just that. Just his name. In her voice. The real voice underneath the careful one. The one he had been listening for across 5 years and 280 miles and every empty morning in between. He put his face in his hands. She reached over and put her hand on his back. I remember, she said quietly. Not all of it, but I remember. And for a long time neither of them said anything else. The grave still stands in the cemetery. Daniel has not removed the headstone. He goes back sometimes. Not to mourn. To remember what it felt like to believe in something impossible long enough for it to become true. He stands in front of the marble and he thinks about the version of himself that knelt in the rain on that November anniversary with lilies in his hands and nothing left to believe in. And then he drives home. To the house he and Amelia bought together 6 months after she came back. A different house. Smaller than the old one. Closer to the water. With a kitchen where the light comes in from the left in the morning. Noah has claimed the room at the top of the stairs. He has covered one entire wall in drawings. He is the kind of child who narrates everything he is doing as he does it and who asks questions without waiting for the answers and who has never in his short life met a silence he didn't try to fill with something. Amelia says he gets it from his father. Daniel says he gets it from her. They are both right. The lesson in this story is not about wealth or power or the dramatic collapse of a villain. Those things happened. But they are not the point. The point is this. Somewhere in a remote cottage by the ocean, a woman who had lost her name and her history, and every thread connecting her to the life she had lived still sat down at a kitchen table in the dark and wrote letters to a man she could not remember. Something in her would not let her stop. Something deeper than memory, deeper than name, deeper than anything that could be taken away by a manipulative man or a car plunging off a bridge in the rain. She wrote the letters because some connections do not break when everything else does. Daniel Cole knelt at an empty grave for 5 years because some love is stubborn enough to outlast its own grief. And a boy named Noah walked across a rain-soaked cemetery to find a man in a photograph because children, sometimes, see what the rest of us cannot. The flowers are still in the grass somewhere. The ones Daniel dropped the day everything changed. He never picked them up. He didn't need to. What would you have done if a child came to you with that photograph? Would you have believed him? Or would grief have made it impossible to trust what you were seeing? Drop your answer in the comments. And if this story moved you at all, please like the video and subscribe to the channel so you never miss what we put out next. We tell these stories because they deserve to be told. And because sometimes the truth we most need to hear arrives in the quietest, most unexpected way. The next story is coming soon. Do not miss it.